The following presentation is brought to you by the Pride of ODU, the official NIL collective of Old Dominion Athletics. Be a monarchist. Join the Pride.
What's up, Monarch Nation? If you listened to our recap of the Marshall game and the preview of A-State, you knew that we were coming live with, well, not live, it's actually recorded, but we're live, Kara. Kara Richey, who, if you've listened to us before, you know that she is the person to go to all things A-State. Today, we're going to talk about A-State football in particular and what Monarch Nation should be looking out for. Kara, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you? Thank you so much for the invite.
Hey, absolutely. I'm doing great. Last night we had our therapy session to talk about the Marshall game. So I know myself, Gary, and two of our former players, Jared, Jonathan, I think we're feeling much better than we were Saturday night. But we're ready to look forward to this Saturday because both teams have a game, and I know that both A State fans and Old Dominion fans will definitely be tuned in. Um, the first thing that sticks out to me is you guys have won 5 straight home games this season and 7 straight home games overall. Talk to us a little bit about A-State football and kind of where things are right now.
This team has been fascinating to watch this season because when you look at Arkansas State, maybe on paper, which is usually your first glance at someone looking at the stats, looking at the record, they might not necessarily be like a pretty team. The wins have been close. The losses have been not great. They've been kind of unenjoyable, but somehow, some way, this team has just found a way to get it done more often than not this season. The home slate has been an adventure because most of those games have gone down to not just the final possession, but like a 2-minute drill at the end where A State has executed flawlessly. But it has kind of been a little bit of a white knuckle ride at times throughout this season. And you're just trying to figure out if this A State team can hold on and come out on top. But in Jonesboro, they've been able to do just that. They've been so good at home. There have been times where they've created a little bit of adversity for themselves that they've had to come back from late in the game to be able to find a way to win. But whether it is being able to execute a 2-minute drive at the end, whether it's been able to get a key interception on the opposition's final drive, some way, somehow, a key kick, a field goal. There was a game earlier this season that was won on a field goal. It just some way somehow this team has been able to pull it off. So while there might not be anything necessarily that stands out at you in terms of the tangibles, in terms of the stats, this team has the intangibles going for it where they're just able to continue to come out on top.
Well, one thing I do notice you talked about the two of those losses. One was at number 17 Michigan, and one was number 20 Iowa State. Uh, can't blame the team for losing those two. And that game at Michigan was a 10-point game. So to me, it's looking like it's been a pretty successful season so far. From fans' perspective, what were fans' expectations at the beginning of the season, and where do you think A-State fans are right now with regards to how the team is playing?
Expectations were high this season, and my expectations were high, so I feel like that's very fair. This is year 4 of the Butch Jones era. He's had, just like every other team, there's been transfers in and out, but he's had a core group of guys that came in with him. The offense returned 10 of 11 starters, and so there was just a good amount of continuity there at some of the key positions, a good amount of continuity with the coordinators, with a lot of the coaches. So it was really easy to have high expectations at the beginning of the season based on that. And this team has came close in terms of being there, but it's been a little bit of an adventure up and down and along the way. I think my expectation and my desire for this team at the beginning of the season was for Arkansas State to be in the conversation of a Sun Belt West Division title on the final week of the regular season. And they're just a tiny bit short. Even if there is a 3-way tie this weekend, if Louisiana loses, A State wins, South Alabama wins. I think all 3 would be 6-2, but due to the tiebreakers, there's no way that A State can come out with a division championship. So you end up just a little bit shy there. The thing with this season is while the wins have been fun, they've been great, they've been enjoyable. The 2 conference losses have kind of stuck in the craw of the A State fan base. One is against the Raging Cajuns. That's the rival. There's been some good back and forth between those teams over the years. The teams don't seem to particularly like each other, so that kind of amps it up a little bit. And then the other one was against Texas State, and both of those are teams that A State beat last year. Both solid performances, and A State beat them handily. So that was a little bit frustrating. But now you get to the end of the season, and this team is 7-4. A State does not have an illustrious football history. So only 17 times prior in the 110 years of A-State football has this team gotten to 8 wins, and the list of 9-win seasons is incredibly short. And that's what A-State could do if they win at home Saturday and then win the bowl game. So I think the fan base is in mostly a good place right now if A-State gets the win on Saturday, but it's taken a couple of twists and turns along the way to get there.
Well, that's a good segue because I think a lot of folks are kind of talking about what this game might be. On the Old Dominion side, there's some fans that are concerned that maybe this team won't get up for the game because bowl eligibility is not on the line anymore. And then on the A State side, they're like, well, they're already bowl eligible. How much does this game really mean? Um, the counter to that, you just answered with regards to these players and this coaching staff has the opportunity to do things that haven't happened in a really long time. And Ricky Ronnie in his post game presser shared something. This question was asked to him about, is this team going to get up for the last game? And I wanted to share with you what he said
Yeah.
because I found it really interesting. Is he asked the folks that were in that post game presser, he goes, when you were young and you were in the playground and you were playing your game, you're playing football or you're playing baseball, said you weren't trying to win because somebody at the park was watching you or that you had fans at the park. It was because you loved playing, you loved winning, and that's just how you're wired. So I'm expecting both teams to, act like there's bowl eligibility at state for both of them. It's a must win.
I think I certainly expect that for Old Dominion, and then of course both of these teams have guys that they hope are going to be back next year, that they can close out the season with strong performances, the young guys, and really use that as a springboard into the offseason, into the next season. For A State, there's several things on the line. Talked about the potential of an 8 and 9 win season. A State has not won 9 games since 2015, so that is potentially on the horizon if you win out. Additionally, you already referenced that A-State is 5-0 at home this season. A-State has not gone through a complete home slate and won out since 2011. So if you get to 6-0 at home, you're able to do that. And I think there's just always going to be pride on the line for the underclassmen to send out your seniors with a win, because that is something that is on the line specifically for ODU on Saturday. For some of those guys, when they walk off that field Saturday night, that's the last time they're going to walk off of a field in uniform. So I think the underclassmen especially are always going to get up for games like that, because they want to make sure that the guys that have worked so hard to teach them and to guide them get to go out with a smile on their face and with a win. And while I think that factors in just a little bit more, obviously, on the ODU side of things, since it is the end of the season, I think the A-State underclassmen will have that measure of pride as well, because it is the last one in Jonesboro for the seniors.
So I'm going to ask you a question that seems to have come up recently, and it's in reference to Senior Day. We've talked to various coaches, different sports. Some like Senior Day, some kind of detest it in a
Sure.
way. Um, some almost wish that it happened earlier in the season. My take is celebrate them at the beginning of the season, because it completely disrupts that game, the fact that it takes them out of their routine. And I would imagine that I would be really emotional at that point. And I'm curious to what your thoughts are with regards to Senior Day being the last home game.
I think it's fine, but then again, I've never really given it a lot of thought. Athletes are creatures of routine more often than not, and of course, they get to the stadium the same time every game, and they go through the prayer, the circle at the center of the field, and then they go and get dress out and do some warm ups and this, that, and the other. And yes, Senior Day absolutely makes that unfold in a significantly different manner, but. Look, by this point in time, you're a senior. You can either harness those emotions or you can't. So again, I know that's easier said than done because there's going to be players that, of course, have family in that get to see them rarely or maybe even never if they're from a little bit further away. And then it's just such a big spotlight at the beginning of the game. So I say, you can deal with those emotions, but I know it's a lot harder than it sounds. But I don't know when it would be a perfect time to do it because especially now with eligibility being so wonky, you honor a guy at the beginning of the season and 2 games later he tears an ACL. You honor him next year. A new
Part
coach comes
two.
in. They don't like him that much. He doesn't play, so he has a traditional red shirt. So you honor him next year. At least at the end of the season, the eligibility picture is a little bit more clear, and you know who is actually definitely departing.
That makes sense. All right, so let's get back to the game at hand. Let's talk a little bit about offense.
Sure.
So, if Monarch fans were going to, I'm not going to have you go through every single player, but if Monarch Nation they needed to know, say, 2 or 3 players on offense, tell us a little bit about them, what we should be looking out for, and how they impact the game.
Sure. Well, you start with quarterback Jalen Rayner. He was last year's Sun Belt Conference Freshman of the Year. And like your guy, Colton Joseph, who I've just looked at, by the way, statistically at this point in time, haven't watched him in action, but dual threat guy. And Jalen Rayner is a guy. I think dual threat. Sometimes you hear that and you think, oh, this guy is going to run at any second. He's actually a little bit better with his arm, and he's got a really good touch on the deep ball. So I think that's his strength there. He is just a sophomore, so he's still got some room to grow. The beginning of the season maybe started off a little bit shaky because there was some movement there on the offensive line. Not everybody was healthy, but as that offensive line has gelled, so too has Jalen Rayner, and the rest of this offense has gotten a little bit better every single week. Offensive line is led by Jacob Bayer. I want to shout him out because I know those guys up front get like no love, and like nobody talks about the O line unless they mess up and
On
allow
our
that.
podcast, I have okay. Mike loves linemen, uh,
Okay.
both sides, but offensive linemen particularly seem to come up. So over the last year and a half, like I started to pay attention to that
Mhm.
uh, because you're right. Is that no one seems to talk about them unless something goes wrong, but they are they are some fun dudes to talk to, and they think
Yes.
if you ask them questions, they're very cerebral and they think through their answers.
Well, alignment typically have to be incredibly strong communicators with each other. There are 5 people that have to act and move as one. So they have that traditional communication. They also have like body language that they have to use with each other. They're the best talkers, in my opinion, hands down. Among if you're stereotyping position groups, offensive linemen are the best talkers. And the A State O line, as mentioned, is led by center Jacob Bayer. Kind of the crazy thing about Bayer, he had a remarkable season last year. He was graded out as the number 2 center in all of college football by Pro Football Focus. Tore his ACL in the spring, had surgery on April 1st. He missed 1 game and he was back the following week. So he missed 5 months and 1 week with an ACL tear, surgery, and recovery. And he has been right back to form. He's a top 10 center again this year, according to PFF. Very good. The guys running behind him, shockingly enough, have gotten better as the year has gone on, as he has gotten better. And the guy that is really playing well right now is Zach Wallace. He's kind of more of that bruising back, he is going to, if there's a 3rd and 1 situation, Zach Wallace is the guy who's going to be in the backfield 100%. Although he did have a nice 57-yard run on Saturday against ULM, it's like he wanted to remind everybody that he's still got some wheels too, and he's not just going to be that 3rd and 1 guy. But he had 130 yards against ULM, a touchdown there. He's really played well. Receiving, Corey Rucker has got an opportunity on Saturday to become Arkansas State's all-time receiving yards leader. So they're going to go to him early and try and make that happen because I think he's just 14 yards away. So you're talking about 1 catch there. Also, Courtney Jackson is a great player in that receiving core, just very stable, business-like. He's a senior. They'll be celebrating him on Saturday. And those 2 guys are probably the ones to look out for. A couple different good tight ends as well. Manny Stevenson, it'll be his senior day. So those are some of the key figures on the Arkansas State offense.
Awesome. All right. Let's go to the other side of the ball on defense. Who's going to scare Monarch Nation if they know what they're looking at?
Travion Thomas. Trey T is having a remarkable run of being captain clutch this year for Arkansas State. He's the only wide receiver, excuse me, only safety or only defensive player in the country that has gone out and intercepted. I'm phrasing this so poorly. Let me back up and get my thoughts clear. All right. He's got 3 interceptions in the final 2 minutes of games. And he's the only player in the country that has gone out and had 3 interceptions on the opponent's final drives. So you go back to Saturday against ULM. It was A-State was up by 7, and he picked off a Warhawk pass with 1 minute and 53 seconds left. A-State got the ball back. A couple plays later, victory formation. That was a win. You go back the following week before that when the Red Wolves were at Georgia State, and he picked off a pass with 1 minute and 32 seconds left. Georgia State had already crossed midfield. They were driving. A-State won that game by 7 points. You go back a few weeks before that, and Troy was in Jonesboro. The Red Wolves were up 34-31, and the Trojans had crossed midfield. Travion Thomas picked off a pass with 10 seconds left. So he has just been that dude this year for the A-State defense. He just has a incredible nose for the football at the most incredibly timely key moments, and it's
So
just
if
awesome.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, don't throw at that guy
No,
as the game is waning. You better
no.
get him early if you're going to get him.
Yeah, maybe just don't throw. Like some of the interceptions, he just it's like he's coming out of nowhere, and next thing you know, he's got the football in his hand.
Gotcha. Anybody on the line that's really kind of causing havoc, or is it just kind of a committee thing?
It is a little bit committee because A-State is remarkably healthy for the most part, considering that it's week 12. However, the one exception to that is on the defensive line. And Butch Jones mentioned today in his weekly press conference that A-State is going to actually have 3 defensive linemen that are done for the season. One of those is defensive end Jaden Jones. And coming into this season, defensive end was a big question mark because there was talent transferring in, but we had not seen that talent in an A-State jersey. So would they be good or not? We just have to wait and see. And they've been good. Jaden Jones was the Sun Belt Player of the Week after the Southern Miss win, but he's been hurt for the past couple of games. He is done for the season. One of the reasons Jaden Jones was playing so much is because going into the season, A-State had won returning defensive end in Ethan Hassler. Ethan Hassler was able to come back and play against Troy, and then the very next game he got injured again. So he's only appeared in 2 games this season. His season is over. And then kind of a depth guy on the interior defensive line, Micaiah Overton, is out as well. Now, there's still guys who can make plays. Brian Whitehead at defensive end is very good. Nate Marty, Tim Hardeman in the middle are very solid, but it is kind of a defense by committee right now because that's what you got to do up front.
All right, and let's finish out this section with special teams. It's particularly important this week because for the first game of this season, where we struggled in
Mhm.
special teams, we gave up 3 long kick returns, and um, it was a challenge. So, what are we looking at A State with regards to their special teams play?
Well, it's a little bit TBD, and I'm not sure if Butch Jones commented on this or not because I didn't have an opportunity to go back and listen to his whole press conference. Arkansas State has a very dynamic kick returner in Jaquez Cross, and he also is one of the primary running backs as well. And I didn't mention him when we were going through the offensive guys because he was extremely limited last week with an ankle, and I'm not sure what that looks like coming up on Saturday. It has just been, we've all gotten so accustomed to seeing Jaquez Cross back there returning kicks, and he was not out there Saturday. Malik Hornsby, a quarterback turned wide receiver, Arkansas to Texas State to Arkansas State guy, but he did a great job. He's got a lot of speed. So it will, unless something crazy happens, it will be one of those guys. And just special teams in general is an area where Butch Jones wants his team to be able to kind of hang their hats across all phases, whether that is kickoff, where I feel like they've got a very good kickoff defense, kickoff return, punt return, where Courtney Jackson is a very dynamic runner, has earned Sunbelt Special Team Player of the Week honors earlier this season for a punt return touchdown, and then punt return defense as well, because you've got a good punter and it's easy to get down there and have coverage when it's a mile high and it stays in the air for forever. So those are aspects where A-State is fundamentally sound. The highlight playmaking ability just depends on A-State getting out of their own way. There's been a few too many flags on kickoff return. But in terms of the make people miss, the speed, things like that, A State absolutely has that in its return game.
All right. So let's take a break from football for a second. I noticed a tweet that you had earlier this week. You seemed really excited about Thanksgiving coming up. One of those biggest excitement being casseroles.
Yeah.
All right. So if we were making the trip to Jonesboro this week and you invited us over, what kind of casserole should we expect?
So you got to start with the basics. There would be green bean casserole, and then there would also be sweet potato casserole because those are just staples of any Thanksgiving spread. But then also, I've got a great recipe for chicken and dumpling casserole. And I know that sounds kind of weird because you don't really think of that being as a casserole, but really, I mean, it's just kind of more about the pan than it is about the meal. But that one is excellent. And then now I'm going to go blank corn casserole, things like that. That's always really good. You got to do like the scalloped potatoes to go on there because why not just throw out all the carbs, all the potatoes? You could do a hash brown casserole. Really, the sky's the limit. It feels like in terms of loading up the Thanksgiving table with as many casseroles and as many sides as you possibly can to go along with usually some okay turkey and then hopefully some really good ham. Ham is where it's at.
So I am really curious when it comes to this chicken and dumpling casserole. Is this a secret family recipe or is that is closely guarded?
No,
Or
it's not a secret family recipe. It's somewhere in the recipe book that I have, but it's I wouldn't classify it as like a secret family recipe because it's one of those things you can Google and the instructions online are exactly what it says on the card. So it's probably one of those things that was like printed on the back of a Bisquick box at some point in time, and now it just ended up in the family box of recipes. But it's I mean, it's solid. It's pretty easy to make. If I recall, it's been a couple years since I've gone through it, so that might be an adventure this year, but it's not anything well. It's pretty good. It definitely looks better than the recipe I found. I found my mom's box of recipes from like the 80s. So they look very 80s. And I found a recipe for raisin donuts, and I think I'm gonna sit that one out.
yeah, I would go with the chicken and dumpling casserole. When this thing gets posted on social media, we might have you respond with a picture of that 80s recipe if you have it handy.
It raisin donuts. I don't know. Every recipe I've found has either Crisco or Oleo in it. So there's gonna be some tweaking.
Um, I don't know how many folks from Norfolk here are going to travel, make the
Mhm.
trip for this game. Being Thanksgiving week, it's
Sure.
kind of a hard one to travel, anyways. But if folks are going to come down, what are some things that places they should go in Jonesboro? Some things that they should know when it comes to if they're going down there for a long weekend. What should they
Sure.
hit?
Well, if you're kind of doing last minute travel, Embassy Suites, there's a hotel literally across the parking lot from the A State football field. So you stay there, you walk over. It's super low maintenance. It's really easy. That's the place to stay. I do warn people. I know not everybody imbibes, but Jonesboro, Arkansas is in a dry county. Which basically means, if you go to any restaurant, you can order your beer, your glass of wine, whatever with dinner. But if you want to go to a liquor store and stock up the cooler, you have to go to the county line. It's not that far away. It's about 15 minutes from the stadium one way, and you stock up and you come back. You can get yourself some Red Wolves Pilsner. But I do like to warn people who live in places where dry counties do not exist because I know that is not an everywhere thing. But other than that, it's a lot of the things to do in Northeast Arkansas are going to be kind of outside warmer activities, and it's going to be about 46 degrees Saturday in Jonesboro. And being a lifelong Southerner, I'm not necessarily looking forward to that. So in terms of the big attractions, there's going to be a pretty light slate. Go to the football tailgate. There's plenty of places to go to eat, and don't hesitate to send me a message or a tweet or whatever if you're looking for food recommendations because I'd list like 40 restaurants. So just tell me what you're into and then I'll tell you where to go. But it should be a fun weekend, and the football, of course, is going to be the highlight.
So is 46 degrees in Arkansas like heated jacket weather for folks down there?
Like I would have hot hands if I had to sit
Okay.
outside. I don't. If it's under 60, it's not okay.
All right. So thank you again for coming on. We've hit 25 minutes. I don't want to hold you too much longer, but before I do let you go, I want to get your prediction on this game.
I think it's going to come down to I think it's gonna be close. I really do. And honestly, if it's close, I'm gonna pick Arkansas State. There's one thing that really kind of jumps out at me when you look at these scores, and it's the fact that A State so far this season is 6-0 in one possession games, and ODU is 2-6. Even though sometimes this Red Wolves team has a tendency to create adversity for itself, at the end of the day, they somehow always manage to be able to overcome that and come out on top, especially at home. So if it stays close, and I think it will, I got to lean with A State, and not just because I usually wear scarlet colored glasses. It just really is the aspect where A State has done well is in the close games. It could be a blowout in one direction or the other. It's hard for me to picture that. I do feel like this A State team hasn't yet had a game where they put it all together and fired on all cylinders, but we're 11 games into the season. That ship has kind of sailed. You are who you are at this point in time. So I don't know if that will happen. ODU, you mentioned, maybe a couple of injuries they have to navigate. And I'll be honest, I'm not as up to speed on the Monarchs at this point in time with the game so close as I should be. So if it got out of hand with ODU on top. That's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around just because I'm not as knowledgeable there. It does seem like on paper these teams have maybe, kind of the same strengths and some of the same weaknesses. So I'm not sure who will be able to take advantage of that. But to give you a way too long answer, I think it's going to be close, and I'll take A State in those scenarios.
That makes sense. We've I think 20, 21 of our last 24 games have been one score games. So
Yeah.
all things being equal, that's where I would go with it. So thank you so much for coming on again. You're definitely a friend of the Monarchist. If you ever need anything, just don't hesitate to reach out to us. And hopefully, the next time that ODU and A State play here in Norfolk, we'll get a chance to host you at our tailgate.
That would be awesome. Hopefully, yes, that will absolutely be the case, and the Sun Belt won't do that thing where they don't have the teams play for like a decade or whatever. And hopefully, we'll get to have one of these conversations again soon. Again, if anybody, safe travels to anybody making the trip from ODU. And if you need any type of recommendations, don't hesitate to shout at me. Thank you so much for the invite today.
Thanks, Kara, and go Monarchs.